to do. Work. As I'm work, we're gonna get nervous. Here else it goes. My topic is, I'm gonna read you my topic, okay? I'm gonna read you my topic. And we're gonna talk about it. Now we have two classes, okay? I think the right thing to do, we'll find out if right actually happens, that we should do about half the time, then take a break and then come back and finish it. But that'll depend on me, and I'm very funny about those things. The topic is how the Rebbe revolutionized the world with shlichus and mivtzoim. This is the topic. Originally, they gave me the topic. Why isn't observing Torah mitzvah enough? Why is it necessary to have a connection to whatever? It's a good topic. I've done this many times over the years. I've been working in this school for 35 years. You can imagine that. So years ago, that was my Shvat talk. That's what they asked me to do. I said, no, do something else. They gave me a new topic. My new topic was how the Rebbe revolutionized the world with shlichus and mivtzoim. So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, that's our topic. What I'm about to say is my imagination. A lot of what I say is my imagination. But at least I try to let you know when I'm telling you my own imaginings and what I've written in books. The previous Rebbe was born in 1880. In 1895, he turned 15 years old. 15 years old. He was the only child of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, whose name was Avshom Deber. On his 15th birthday, try to remember how you were when you were 15. On his 15th birthday, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, said to his son, I am taking you to the oil. Then it was the oil of the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose name was Reb Shmuel, the Rebbe Marash, and the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, who carries our Rebbe's name, Menachem Mendel. I'm taking you to the oil. He was 15 years old. And I am taking you to an Akedah. You know what the Akedah is? The Akedah is when Avraham Avinu tied Yitzchak on the Mizbeach, and he was literally prepared to the lighting here is so bad because the light is behind him. Whoever's in charge of the technology should move that camera to a different position because I'm a shadow. I don't mind, but you should mind. There is, and I may put it here. Put it on a different angle, but it's less of the sunlight, you get more of me. Okay. Now, sunlight's a very good thing, and I may not be such a good thing because I have to ask my wife. But this is a little bit better. Yeah, this is better, a little bit better. Not much better, but it's a little bit better. Okay, I'll move myself over, so we'll make that a little better. Here we are. He says to his 15-year-old son, I'm taking him to an Akedah. Which Akedah? He's going to bind him on the Mizbeach like a Avraham bound Yitzchak on the Mizbeach. We know what was supposed to happen. Right? We say it every single day. The Akedah Yitzchak, we read every day. That Hashem told Avraham Avinu, put your son on the Mizbeach and leave him there. He didn't tell him, put him on and take him off. He said, put him, leave him there. Then, as soon as Avraham picked up the knife, Rahman al-Islam, to do what Avraham Avinu thought he was supposed to do, Hashem says, no, don't touch him. I told you to put him on. I never told you that you should take his life. Take him off. So Akedas Yitzchak is a symbol for binding somebody for their whole life. Not just in time, but in quality. The Rebbe Rayatz was 15 years old, and his father says, I'm taking Akedas Yitzchak, and I'm binding you to serve the Jewish people till the last drop of blood, till the greatest Messiah. For the next 55 years, the Rebbe lived 70 years. So the 55 years, the Frierdiker Rebbe was a servant of the Jewish people with no regard for himself at all. The Frierdiker Rebbe. For 25 years, he did this work as his father's right-hand man. And for the 30 years after that, he did this work as a Rebbe, as the Frierdiker Rebbe, as a Rebbe. The story of the Frierdiker Rebbe, it's impossible to tell. You want to talk about a martyr? a person who gave everything away for the Eibishter, for the Jewish people. The Frierdiker Rebbe, his life and his work is martyrdom, is Mesiras Nefesh for 55 years, not for 1 minute, not for 1 day, not for a month. His whole life was sacrificing himself on the Mizbeach, on the altar of public service on behalf of the Jewish people. You can't possibly exaggerate the Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh, the degree of sacrifice that the Frierdiker Rebbe had over the course of his entire life, from the time he was 15. You can't exaggerate. It's extraordinary. It's unbelievable. It's really, really extraordinary. It's amazing. It's unreal. And the most extraordinary thing about it was his father did it to him. He didn't choose it. His father said to him, I'm making you a carbon. His father didn't do that for himself. The Rebbe Rashab was 15 years old. He was sitting and learning and davening and talking to nobody except books. You understand? When he became a Rebbe at the age of 21 or 22 years old, he isolated himself. He separated himself from the world so he should be able to, quote unquote, prepare himself to become a Rebbe. But he did not afford his own son that same luxury. The Rebbe Rashab gave himself time to become a Rebbe. He didn't become a Rebbe till 33. And until that age, he separated himself from people so he could prepare. His son, he prepared. From the time he was 15, the Frierdiker Rebbe served the Jewish people. What about his own davening, his own learning, his own Torah, his own mitzvahs? Everything was second to serving the Jewish people. That's really the story of the Frierdiker Rebbe's life. And I think this is a real feeling. It's mamish, not based on any fact, but it's my feeling that if you want to understand the iskashas of our Rebbe to the Frierdiker Rebbe, I don't like when women walk behind me. It makes me very nervous. Okay, I'm going to move. It's not perfect. It's my hang-up. I'm afraid of women. It's a problem that I have my whole life. Women intimidate. It's okay. You shouldn't walk. To me, it's the same thing as a man walking between two women. Okay, if you want to walk in front of me. Go ahead, walk here. Don't worry.
Yeah, they're gonna do a fire drill next door in a little bit, so we don't need to do anything.
Okay. It's not with you. It's with me. If you have to walk in front of me. Don't go behind me. It's not because I'm afraid of people. I'm afraid of women. If you'd be a man, it would bother me. If just a girl, it makes me very nervous. I'm very nervous. I feel very deeply that if you want to understand the Rebbe, our Rebbe's, his kashas to his father, the Rebbe looked at the Frierdiker Rebbe with a respect and a reverence on a level which is unimaginable. The Rebbe, the way you can't say worship because you're not allowed to worship a person, but the way he valued his Shvet, his father on the Frierdiker Rebbe, and his words and his statements. If the Frierdiker Rebbe told him that the sun was pink, the sun was pink. If Frierdiker Rebbe told him that the ocean was black, it was black. The derech eretz, the reverence with which our Rebbe held the Frierdiker Rebbe is beyond imagining. And the Rebbe was a giant. I mean, anybody will tell you, I'll tell you, the Frierdiker Rebbe will tell you that the Rebbe was greater than the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's not even a question. He was greater in so many ways. But the Rebbe's respect for the Frierdiker Rebbe, if you said that to the Rebbe, he would get really upset. By him, the Rebbe, the Shvet, God, Frierdiker Rebbe, that's it. There was nobody else. I feel that if you want to understand the degree of respect that the Rebbe had for Frierdiker Rebbe, this is where you have to look. The Rebbe's life was very different than Frierdiker Rebbe's life. The Rebbe had a very, very early child, very peaceful. He had two parents who were always home. Frierdiker Rebbe, as a kid, didn't have parents because his father was traveling a lot. As a little boy, he was left with his grandmother. His parents traveled together. The Rebbe Rashab always traveled with his wife, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was left home alone. And the Rebbe traveled for health. He traveled for other reasons. Our Rebbe's life was, he became a Rebbe at 49. The Frierdiker Rebbe became a public servant at 15. You understand the difference? The Rebbe lived in his parents' home. His father raised him. His father was a Gadol Yisrael. And he was really by himself, learning and davening into his 30s. Till he came to America. He was 40 years old, come on. The Rebbe's early life was very, very private. He was able to do what he wanted. He mastered Torah. He mastered all the chachmas in the world. The Frierdiker Rebbe was never given that time. At 15, he became de facto a Rebbe. And I wasn't a Rebbe. His father was the Rebbe. But he did what a Rebbe does. He served the Jewish people. And his whole life, was a life of sacrifice for Jewish people. I feel deeply that what drew the Rebbe to Frierdiker, what made the Rebbe say, this is the Rebbe, this is Neshama Klolis, for me, was the Mesiras Nefesh. The Rebbe was attracted to the idea of giving everything away to God. Now, I'm attracted by pizza, you understand? You're attracted by sushi, or I don't know what you're attracted. The Rebbe was attracted to the Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. The Rebbe was attracted to the idea of how can you serve Hashem the most? How can you serve Hashem the most? So it says in the Maimon, Rabbi Kiva read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the highest level of loving Hashem is afilu u'neitlas nafshecha, if he's going to take your life. And Rabbi Kiva said to his students as they were taking him to the gallows, Kol yoman nitzta'arti mosa yovel ayodi v'akayamenu. When am I going to have the zchus to die for God? Kipshute, to give my life away for Hashem. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, was a great man, I'm going to tell you. Was a great tzaddik, great servant of Hashem. His hunger, his ambition was to give everything away to the Rebbe. I feel that. And in the Frierdiker Rebbe, he saw someone who did it. In the previous Rebbe, his father-in-law, he saw a human being who gave God everything, kept nothing. And I feel, this is my feeling, that this is the basis for the Hiskashis. When the Rebbe saw how great the Frierdiker Rebbe, but how ready he was willing to throw his life away for the Jewish people and for the Torah, the Rebbe said, this is my Rebbe. I'm going to follow this man. And the Rebbe was dedicated to the Frierdiker Rebbe that way. The Rebbe lived his life that way. You give everything away, you keep nothing for yourself. And what's even more interesting is the Rebbe taught that lesson to Chassidim, that a Lubavitcher gives everything away. You don't keep anything for yourself. Not easy. We don't do it. We certainly don't all do it. You can find a Lubavitcher here or there who actually lives this way. But this is how the previous Rebbe lived. He gave it all. He gave everything. He kept nothing for himself. He gave his life away. Many, many times. That he lived till 70 is such a miracle. Because he didn't have any rachmanas on himself at all. He never thought about himself. He thought about the mission. And the Rebbe was his chassid. The Rebbe took that from the Frierdiker Rebbe and he did it in his way, in our generation. So you have to understand the previous Rebbe to understand the Rebbe. So for 25 years, he did this Mesiras Nefesh, this sacrifice as his father's right hand. Then his father passes away. He becomes the Rebbe, the Nasi of Chabad. And for the next 30 years, he did this as a Rebbe. But as the Rebbe explains in the talks, the Frierdiker Rebbe had to reinvent himself. You know, one of the best things about our Rebbe, he never moved anywhere. Right? In 1951, he was in 770. Today, he's in 770. He hasn't budged. Right? The Rebbe is in the same place throughout. The Frierdiker Rebbe was constantly moving. I don't know what happened, but the camera doesn't see me. Oh, I see. The Frierdiker Rebbe was constant. It's good. Was constantly moving. He became the Rebbe in Rostov. Then they gave him two choices: go to jail or move to Petersburg, to Leningrad. So he moved to Leningrad. They arrested him in Leningrad and they almost killed him. They had every intention of taking his life. And the Frierdiker Rebbe did nothing to save himself. The Eibushter saved him. Then after he came out of jail, he realized that he cannot stay in Leningrad. He moved to a suburb of Moscow called Balakhovka. And after a few months, he made the decision to leave Russia. And he left Russia. When the Frierdiker Rebbe left Russia, he moved to a place called Riga, which is in Latvia. And he traveled all over the world. He was in Israel, he was in America, he was all over Eastern Europe. In the next 5 years, until the Frierdiker Rebbe started to show signs of his paralysis, the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1933 became very, very sick. And he was really getting worse and worse and worse. It took him a long time to find a doctor who used alternative medicine, who healed the Frierdiker Rebbe. It had to do with diet and other things. And he started to actually recover. But in 1933, the Frierdiker Rebbe almost lost his life. He had paralysis. Every disease a person could have, he had. His body was so beaten up, so broken. So before that illness, from 1928 to 1933, he traveled a lot. He finally decided that he wants to live in Poland. Living in Poland was like going back to Lubavitch, the old way, Molshtetl, Siddim, davening and learning, yeah. And he lived in Poland for a few years, and then the war came, he ended up in America. Now it's clear from the documents that we have that the previous Rebbe had every intention of coming to America. Had there not been a world war, the Rebbe would come to America anyway. The Frierdiker was planning to come to America. In 1938, the Frierdiker Rebbe applied for immigration to the United States a year before the war started. When the war started, not to save the Frierdiker Rebbe's life, in the Department of State, they already had his papers, which is how he was able to save himself. He came to America. And he, in a talk, the previous Rebbe himself describes sitting on a ship, being 60 years old. He described, imagine a 60-year-old man. It's funny because I'm 60, I feel like a boy. The Frierdiker Rebbe at 60 was so warm, his body was so broken. Broken in body. Yeah, there's a broken in body, an old man having to start, he says about himself, having to start their life over like a baby. Came to this country and he reinvented himself completely. So the first story that I want to tell in conjunction with your Shvat, with this Farbrengen, and it's a story plus an interpretation. The Frierdiker Rebbe spent 13 days on a ship traveling across the Atlantic Ocean from where he left in Sweden. I think he left from Stockholm to New York, sitting in his cabinet, sitting in his room, in his little cabinet, little room in the ship, thinking, meditating. He describes this in his writing. He was asking himself a question that only a Rebbe has to ask. What am I going to do when I get to America? Most of us, when we want to know what to do, we ask the Rebbe. Yeah? The Rebbe has to create it. The Rebbe Layatz, the Frierdiker Rebbe, sat on that ship for 13 days and asked himself, what am I going to do when I come to America? And he had basically two choices. The logical choice was, as they say it in America, to retire. He was 60 years old. He was beaten up. He had done so many wonderful things. He could have moved to a suburban place. They wanted him to live in Lakewood. You can imagine that, which became the hub of Torah in America, the Litvische Torah in America. They wanted the Rebbe to live in Lakewood. They schlepped him to Lakewood. He spent the first Pesach in America in Lakewood. And he decided against it. He'd come to America and live in a suburb where there's no noise and there's no cars and there's no hubble and bustle. And people would come to see him as Chassidim came to Rebbe to Lubavitch. It should be beautiful. To have a beautiful house with a garden and trees and quiet and be able to sit and learn and daven and do his thing. And the people would come to visit him would be going back to like a Lubavitcher kind of world, a rural world, a shtetl world. And the alternative was to live in New York City. And the Rebbe had to make these decisions himself. He could not trust anybody with these decisions because all the people around him made their own decisions. Every single one of them. Every single decision to make. People gave him advice. But he did what he thought. He sat on that ship for 13 days and I'm coming to America. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he was asking the question like a Rebbe asks a question. A Rebbe, in Kabbalah, is called a male soul. We're all called female souls. It's called a male soul. A female soul follows. A male soul creates and leads. The Rebbe asked himself, when I get to the new world, what am I going to do? And he decided at the age of 60, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to fight with the whole America. Frierdiker Rebbe couldn't talk a word of English. Couldn't even talk. You listen to his speech. My grandfather met the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1940. 1940. Didn't understand a word. Didn't understand one word. He had to know how to translate it. Because the Rebbe couldn't speak. He had a stroke. He had paralysis. He was very sick. Only a few people understood his schito, his speech. And he decided that he's going to take on the world. How? He's going to move to the center of the world. In those days, the center of the world was New York, and the center of New York was Brooklyn, and the center of Brooklyn was Crown Heights. Do you know that Brooklyn is very flat? Brooklyn is very flat, except for one neighborhood that's built on a mountain. We happen to live in that neighborhood. You know how I know? Because I live at the bottom of that mountain, and I climb that mountain all the time. The rest of Brooklyn is flat. When you go on Taluch, you walk 4 or 5 miles. You never go uphill, you never go downhill. On the way back, you get to Crown Heights, all of a sudden you're climbing a mountain. It's the only mountain in Brooklyn. I'm going to live in Crown Heights. In those days, it was the most prominent neighborhood in the city. Brooklyn was the most prominent borough in New York, and Crown Heights was probably a neighborhood full of Jews, very well-to-do, who were either second or third generation Americans. Most of them spoke Yiddish. Most of them had grandparents who were from, not grandparents who were from, whom they knew, but they were American. They were American. And being an American was very, very important to them. Being American was more important to them than being a Jew. And the Rebbe made up his mind. I am going to come to America and I'm going to change it. I'm going to, as the Rebbe said, I'm going to make America into what Europe was. On the ship with the previous Rebbe, there were people who traveled with him. One of the people who traveled with him was who would be our Rebbe's primary secretary, Rabbi Chaim Mordechai Isaac Chadekov, Rabbi Chadekov. When they sat on that ship, Rabbi Chadekov was then already 39 years old. He was born in 1901. He was older than our Rebbe. Rabbi Chadekov was a man of incredible accomplishments. When he was in his early 20s, he led an entire network of schools that were called Shemoneh Shabbos, from schools in Latvia. Latvia was a modern country. Rabbi Chadekov was, in his own right, extremely accomplished. He was a very God-fearing man. He was a Chassidish Yid, a big Yirei Shamayim. And he had achieved great things in Latvia about Shemoneh Shabbos and Jewish education. And the Friedrich Rebbe brought him along, and he put him into his cabinet, into his inner circle of assistants in the holy work that he was doing. On the ship, Rabbi Chadekov once told the story. The Friedrich Rebbe called him in and says, I need suggestions for chinuch. I'm going to America and I want to teach little children, not big old men and women, not alter chassidim like Lubavitch used to be. I want to teach children. I want you to give me counsel about how I can reach children. And Rabbi Chadekov was asked by the previous Rebbe to come up with ideas. On the ship, Rabbi Chadekov came back to the previous Rebbe and he gave him 3 suggestions. We don't know what they are because I don't know what they are. Rabbi Chadekov would say many years later that over the course of the 10 years that the previous Rebbe was in this country, he saw the Rebbe implement each one of the 3 suggestions he had made on the ship. The Friedrich Rebbe decided to reinvent Lubavitch, which is to reinvent us. Lubavitch is going to become a Chassidus with the central pole, the central identity of the movement is children. And not necessarily Hasidic children learning in a Hasidic school. The children of Jewish parents who are lost because they're learning in a public school and they're getting no Jewish education. This was going to be his spearhead. This is where he was going to direct his first arrow. Kinderach, chinuch. And when he came to this country, the first organization that he founded was called HaMerkaz Le'Inyonei Chinuch, a center for the matters of the education of children. This was his big thing. Children. He was going to reach the American youth, the American child, and he was going to transform America, beginning with the little kinder. He came to America. He had no money. He had no money. He had a few friends, but his friends had no money. And his friends all felt bad for him. He had suffered so much. He had lost so much. They wanted to make his life comfortable. So they schlepped him to Lakewood for Pesach. They gave him a wonderful Pesach. He lived in a mansion, beautiful house, with all the accommodations that anybody could want. And they hope that he'll like it and he'll stay there. But the Rebbe had an itch. He had an itch, you understand? He had an itch which was planted in him 45 years before by his father on his 15th birthday. And that itch was, I serve the Jewish people. And how can I best serve the Jewish people is the question he asked himself every day. And in his life, he mamish reinvented himself several times. He became a different person from one world to a second world to a third world. The Rebbe said one of the greatest things about the Friedrich Rebbe was his adaptability, his ability to change. He came to Russia, the revolution happened, there was a war against religion. He reinvented himself one time. He came to Poland and reinvented himself a second time. And he came to America, he reinvented himself a third time. And he made his focus little kids in public school in America, not big chassidim. Now we needed chassidim, we needed an army, right? We had to help him, we had to do the work for him. But where was he looking? He was looking at the Jewish child, who in a generation or 2 or 3 would, God forbid, marry a goy. And he was going to teach that child how to be a Jew. This was the mission that he set for himself. So when he came to America, he had a yeshiva, about 6 bachar in the whole yeshiva. And they started to work. No money, no people, no help. Everyone thought he was out of his mind. And to move to Crown Heights, it's like starting at a bisteve I don't know what, on Park Avenue. It's like, real, it's not Chassidish. The people didn't want him there. You know that they passed around the petition. When the Rebbe wanted to buy that house, 770, which was only 3 years old, it was built in 1930s. It was a brand new house with an elevator, and it was perfect for the Frierdiker Rebbe's need. It was built for him. The guy who built it wasn't thinking about it, but it was built for him. The people on the block sent around a petition to prevent the Rebbe from buying the house because they were afraid that the Hasidim would ruin the neighborhood. You understand? Let them come today and buy a house for $2 million. But then it was bad for business. You understand? The man who lived next door was a dentist. The Rebbe's library. He was a dentist. They brought him the petition. One of the last people. They should sign it. He took the petition. He read it. He tore it up in little tiny pieces. And he said, on the other side of the Atlantic, they're killing Jews. Murdering Jews. And a rabbi comes to this country and wants to stop it. We're going to stop him. He was the neighbor of 770 for 20 years. And when the Bacham used to make noise and disturb his sleep, he would open up the window and scream, you have to be quiet. And they would tell him where to go, you understand? And he would say, if not for me, you wouldn't be here. And he has this chus that the Rebbe and the Rebbe physically lived in his house. His house belongs to the library. I don't know how he gave it to Lubavitch. I'm sure we paid for it, but we probably paid less than it was worth. That's the Rebbe's library. The Rebbe lived in that house, in the house which he prevented them from preventing the Rebbe from moving into Crown Heights. It made no sense. From Yidden lived in Williamsburg. Crown Heights was for the freie, up-and-coming cool dudes, you understand, the modern Jews. The Rebbe said, I'm going to live in the hub of America. And I'm going to take on America from the inside. And I'm going to win. The old man who couldn't talk and couldn't walk and didn't speak English and wasn't a citizen. I'm going to take on the great America and I'm going to win. How do you do it? You start small, but you start. The first activity of Lubavitch in America was called Masiba Shabbos. In this neighborhood, in Crown Heights, then, you had thousands of Jewish kids, not hundreds, thousands of Jewish kids, most of whom spoke Yiddish, because their parents spoke Yiddish, their grandparents for sure spoke Yiddish, all going to public school, and they were the coolest kids in the world. They davened in the Brooklyn Jewish Center, now known as Ola Teda. It was the largest conservative temple ever built in the world. It's across the street here, now it's Ola Teda, where they don't teach a word of Limud Chol. You understand? This was the largest conservative temple. They davened all these big shuls. They were fancy schmancy people. And the Bachanim used to make in the shuls on Shabbos, a Masiba Shabbos, and they would gather the kids, push it off the streets, and they would make brachas with them. They made every bracha. They made a Zenis and a Gofen and a Eitz and a Adoma and a Shakal. They wanted to teach them how to make brachas. And they would tell them stories and talk about the parasha. For a lot of these children, this was their only Yiddishkeit. Some, very few, but some of these kids went to yeshiva. And later, some of them became Rosh Yeshiva, big Talmidei Chacham. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe told his Bachanim, when you're learning Teda, learn Teda, but when you're not learning Teda, go out into the street, find a Jewish child, and teach him Aleph. There was a Rav here in America, a Lubavitcher Rav, whose name was Rabbi Konikov. He lived in Williamsburg. He knew about the release time program that the government made. In America, there's a very strict separation of church and state, right? They're not allowed to bring church into the public schools. But they gave permission for 1 hour of religious instruction a week. You could take the children out, Jewish children and Catholic children and Protestant children and Muslim children, into another place, not in the public school, and you could teach them. So Lubavitch started doing that work. Wednesday, 770 would clear out. All the Bachim would go to the public schools and they would recruit the children. They had to get the parents' permission. Parents had to sign. They would stand outside the public schools and they would get the kids to take these notes home to their parents, and the parents would sign. And every week, one day, they took the children out, take them to a nearby shul, and teach them Torah for 1 hour a week. The release time program in its height had tens of thousands of children all over Brooklyn, all over New York, who were being recruited and being taught Torah, not just by Lubavitcher boys and girls. Every frum boy and girl in New York who was learning in a yeshiva was involved in the release time program in the 40s, because there was not enough Lubavitchers. YU was involved, Tiferes Yerushalayim was, Asamisha Feinstein yeshiva was involved, Teda B'das was involved, Chaim Berlin was involved. All the yeshivas in New York sent their bracham on Wednesday. The work came from here, from Rabbi Hecht's office, right across the street, 824 Eastern Parkway. Yankel Hecht. And they would leave the yeshiva and find these kids and teach them Torah. And the Lubavitch used to give them a little magazine with material, what story to tell, what halacha to teach, and what mitzvah to talk about, so the kids would learn Torah. These were the first two programs of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Along with this, he made a publishing house, a printing shop, a publishing house. And it was called Merkes, not in Merkes. And they published in English. The first kosher literature for children in America in English was from here, from Lubavitch. Nobody, my mother told me, you couldn't get into it. There was a lot of books on conservative, which was, quasi kosher. When my mother was a child, there was one book in English that she could read that was not Lubavitch. It was the story Ketantan. Ketantan is the Jewish Tom Thumb. Okay, Ketantan, you can look them up on the internet, I'm sure you can find them. We read Ketantan as children as well. And the Rebbe began to publish for children in America in English stories and halachas and mitzvahs to draw the children in. And it was, by the standards of the 1940s, which is 85 years ago, modern. It wasn't just Hasidish, it was modern. Then our Rebbe showed up. The Rebbe of the 1941, a year ago, 15 months later. And the Rebbe put him in charge of this. The previous Rebbe in charge. The Rebbe got very involved in this. And he oversaw the activities, the Mesilas Shabbos and the Wednesday hour and the publications. It was his baby. This great genius of Torah was busy finding ways of telling a story that a little kid who's going to public school should hear a story about the Eibishter. That's what our Rebbe was busy with. He could have been saying Chiddushei Torah, writing Maimorim, but this was the trajectory of Lubavitch. This was what the Frierdiker Rebbe made the decision on that ship, and he never questioned himself. The decision was made, and the decision was permanent, that Lubavitch is going to become a movement that their essence, that their center, is to teach Yiddish Kinderlach, not boys who are necessarily learning in yeshiva, or girls who are learning in a yeshiva, but the children who are not getting a Jewish education, to bring them the Eibishter, to bring them Torah, to bring them mitzvahs. Now, our Rebbe had a few ideas of his own. Number one of the biggest ideas that our Rebbe brought in this whole campaign was the parades. The Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe were very holy people. They were extremely holy people. But they were not only smart, but they were aware. Meaning, when they came to America, they studied America. There's a piece of film which I think every person has to watch, but you have to watch it with the right set of eyes. The Frierdiker Rebbe walking off the ship in 1929, the first time he came to this country. He was still healthy. He's walking down a gangplank like a king, holding a little stick. He's walking. And two policemen, two American Irishmen, big hoicher goyim, get on either side of him because they have to give him cover. He has to walk him off the ship. But in America, everything is a show. So the video has been edited. If you see the unedited video, the Rebbe is walking, and this Irish policeman gets on the side of the Rebbe, and he physically manhandles the Rebbe. He grabs the Rebbe, like say, stop. He put his hand on the Rebbe. Okay, now we can walk. So the American covered. So they walk with him into America. The Frierdiker looks at that hand. You can see the film. Looks at the hand. Thinks, okay, I'm in America now. This is called respect. This is Americana derech. But as he's walking down the plank, he's looking around. You see that he's looking. You see that he's taking in his environment. He's not hiding. He's looking. When the Rebbe came to America, same thing. They studied America. They wanted to understand America. They wanted to understand American youth because they wanted to speak their language. And one of the first things the Rebbe's figured out that in America, everything is a demonstration. Everything is a show. I'm a Meshuggah type 47XYD Ford Q. I'm going to make a parade that stands for Michigan of XY4D, QQ, whatever the numbers were. And we're going to march in the streets with placards. I'm going to put on funny clothes. I'm going to celebrate myself. And I don't care what you think. So the Rebbe made parades for Jewish children in 1942. Well over 80 years ago. The kids marched on Eastern Parkway carrying signs. Give your children a Torah education. Keep the Shabbos holy. How many Jews in America who consider themselves frum worked on Shabbos? Millions. Because they didn't work on Shabbos, you starve. And the Rebbe had the kids march in the streets. Many years ago, probably 40 years ago, I heard a story from a friend of mine that he was learning in yeshiva in Montreal. And on Friday, the Bach went on Mitzvahim. All the Babishas go on Mitzvahim on Friday. The boys go on Friday. So they wanted to get into an office building. Now, to get into office buildings are tricky because the guard at the door doesn't want you in because he knows that you're going to ruin the building because you're not coming for business. You're coming for mitzoyim, for religion. Nobody wants religious people around. So they had to get into the building. Anyway, it was a lawyer's building of law offices, which is big maches, and the guard at the door was a tough guy. They snuck in somehow, the guys, and they went from office to office looking for Jews. They come into one particular office. They meet a lawyer who was in his 60s. Then he was in his 60s. Takes one look at them and says, you're Chabad? You're Chabad. He says, listen, I want nothing to do with you. I want you to leave my office and never come back. I'm not interested in the film and don't waste my time. But before you leave, I have to tell you a story. Before you go, I grew up in Montreal in the 1930s, he says. If you were a Jew living in America and Canada in the 1930s, you didn't want your neighbor to know that you were a Jew. Not you didn't want your neighbor to know that you were from Jew. You didn't want your neighbor to know that you were a Jew. There was such anti-Semitism. If you were a Jew, you hid it. You wore a yarmulke, you wore a cap. You wore tzitzit, you put them in your pants. You concealed your identity as a Jew. We went to public school. We hid our Jewish identity. We didn't want anybody to know. We were afraid. Then in 1942, 9 Polish Bacharim, 9 boys with Nechatim, who went through all of Russia and Japan, came to America. The Canada gave 9 visas. They gave, I think, more than 9, but they gave 9 visas to Lubavitcher Bacharim to live in Canada. When they moved to Canada, the previous Rebbe sent a shliach from New York to start the yeshiva. 9 Polish Bacharim. They had no principal, they had no teacher, they had no financial officer. 9 boys. And they started to learn Torah. And they raised money to support themselves. And the day they arrived in Montreal, they began to do the same things that were being done in New York. They made Mesilas Shabbos, and they made Mitvach Shah. They made Wednesday hour. And boys and girls, Jewish boys and girls in Canada, were schlepped out of the public schools, would come out of their homes on Shabbos afternoon and meet in a shul and learn Torah. And this man says, I want you to know. Those boys came to Montreal and they made a parade. And I marched in those parades. It was the first time in my life that I didn't hide the fact that I was a Jew. I marched in those parades. He was 9 years old, 10 years old. He marched in those parades. The first time in my life, I said, I'm not going to hide that I'm a Jew. And he said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe made the Jewish people proud. On the other side of the world, our blood is spilling like water. Yeah? And in America, the Rebbe is creating a Jew, is not going to hide. If you're going to march in the street and say to the world, I am a Jew, tough luck. He said, the Rebbe made us proud to be Jewish. But I don't want to put on film. And one thing or the other. This was the parade. This is one of the activities that Rebbe introduced. They tell a story that on Wednesday, the Rebbe was in charge of the Wednesday hour. So he used to look over the curriculum and make sure it was prepared, that it was paid for. The Rebbe once walked into the shul on a Wednesday, and a bacher was sitting and learning. One boy. He says, what are you doing here? Why aren't you in the public school? So he gave the Rebbe some excuse why this week he was taking off. The Rebbe said, get up, go out, and do the work. You have to save Jewish children. This was, girls, a decision that the Rebbe made, the Frierdiker Rebbe made on that ship, which has redefined us for the last 86 years. And it's the foundation. It's the foundation of understanding the Rebbe's Messiah, the Rebbe's leadership. There was a Jew named Michael Schwartz. Do you ever go to the museum? You know what the museum is? Someone say yes, please. Yes. Yeah. You go up to the second floor? Yes? Yeah. There's a big, big mural on the wall. Very, very long. Must be 20 feet long. A picture of how the world of the Mashiach comes. You ever see that mural? That mural is made out of alphabet, of letters. That mural was made by Michael Schwartz. Michael Schwartz learned in Lubavitch in the 40s. He wasn't a Lubavitcher. According to him, he didn't do too much learning. Why? He sat in class the whole day and made pictures. He was an artist. He made a living as an artist. He was a cartoonist. He made a living as a cartoonist. But as a kid, he would doodle. So the Rebbe heard there's a boy in yeshiva who was busy making pictures. So instead of punishing him, he called him into the office. I need you to make pictures for our magazines. And he used to make every month, when they give out the talks and tales, he used to make the cartoons, pictures with little captions that the Rebbe made in those years. And the Rebbe would stand over him and watch him make these cartoons, and the Rebbe would say to him in Yiddish, Michal, mach wie Dick Tracy. You know who Dick Tracy is? Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy, they used to have in the old days, People used to read newspapers. You girls don't know what that means anymore. Years and years ago, everybody bought newspapers every day, some more than one paper a day, yeah? And the newspapers had a cartoon strip for the children. The Sunday had a whole pullout of cartoons, a strip of what was it called? Snoopy the dog, with a whole bunch of different cartoons. There was the favorite cartoon was a cartoon of a sleuth, of a detective, whose name was Dick Tracy, and he wore one of these hats, a fedora like this here, with the pinch to say like this. So the Rebbe says to Michael Schwartz that when he makes the pictures, they should look like Dick Tracy. Why? Because that's what the kids were into. The Rebbe wanted that the material that Lubavitchers produced should speak to the children where the children were. Mark, imagine the Rebbe saying, so the Rebbe had to study the newspaper. The Rebbe wasted his time buying the New York Times, looking at the newspaper, saying, what do the kids like? The kids like the cartoon. Which is their favorite cartoons? We're going to make the pictures and the talks and tells look like that cartoon. Because we want the kids to read what's written in those pictures. Because we have to reach those children. This was the thinking of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, and this became the spearhead of Lubavitch. Now, Lubavitch is still Lubavitch. We're religious, we keep Shabbat, we keep kosher, we learn Torah, Chassidus, we daven. All the things Chabad did, Chabad is still doing. But the center, the spearhead, the head of the arrow is this. This was the decision that the Frierdiker Rebbe made on the ship in 1940. In 1948 or 49, I'm not sure exactly, the previous Rebbe sent his son-in-law to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel. Not the Rebbe, the other son-in-law. The Frierdiker had three daughters. One of them was killed by the Nazis, unfortunately. And the other two were here in New York. One of them was Rabbi Garari, the older Shrugged, the Rebbe's older brother, Rabbi Garari. He sent him to Eretz Yisrael to see the place where the Lubavitch Chassidim would settle in what now became known as Kfar Chabad and so on. And while he was there, he met many Gedolei Yisrael, many important people. He met amongst the important people he met some very holy people. He met the Holy Bells of Rebbe, the Halakha Bells of Rebbe, the Ravna Bell, and he met the Getter Rebbe. I don't know the logistics of it, but I think it was the basis of his father, the Martha Getter. These were senior Rebbes. They were the same age as the Frierdiker Rebbe. And they both told him the same thing. We are aware of the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe has taken a new direction. We're aware the Frierdiker Rebbe changed Chassidus from inreach to outreach. He's redefined Lubavitch as a movement whose center is the kids in the public school. And we want you to know that we approve. They were not going to do it with their own Chassidim, but they agreed that the Frierdiker Rebbe could do it with his. So they both told the Rashak, tell the Rebbe, tell the Frierdiker Rebbe, that as crazy as this is, we understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you have our support. You understand? It's still hard for the frum world to understand Lubavitch, because they still don't understand that we're different in our heart. We're not different in our action. Different in our soul. The soul of Lubavitch is the kid who's not frum. Not we do that also. No, that's what we do. That's the essence. That's the soul of Lubavitch. And to this day, they don't appreciate this. And because they don't appreciate it, they don't understand us. What they don't understand us, they hate us. Because what you don't understand, you fear. What you fear, you hate. What you hate, you try to destroy. But the Rebbe made this change 86 years ago. But he made that change for us, not for himself. You're Babich, you remember this family. This is our definition. This is a decision made by the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe's Ogazund, and our Rebbe was his son-in-law. And he wanted Mesiras Nefesh. That's how I see it. And he became the Frierdiker Rebbe's right hand in all of these activities. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, he continued them, and he did them on a much, much bigger scale. A much, much, much bigger scale. I'm going to tell you one more story, and then we're going to stop. Okay, we're going to stop just for 5 minutes. We'll find out how long 5 minutes is. There's a Jewish 5 minutes, there's a Lubavitch 5 minutes, and then there's a Mochel Liadis 5 minutes, and then there's my 5 minutes. We have to see how all the 5 minutes is converge. If they're going to be concurrent or successive. We'll find out soon enough. I'll say one more story. A few months before the Frierdiker passed away, the Rebbe walked into the Frierdiker Rebbe. Our Rebbe walked to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker was sitting at his desk, and he was deep in thought. And Frierdiker was very, very busy. He didn't stop for a second. He was always doing things. Here the Rebbe walks in, and the Rebbe is so fatrach. The Frierdiker Rebbe is so introspective. It was surprising. He stood and he watched. Frierdiker Rebbe was thinking. Suddenly, the Frierdiker Rebbe looks up, and he sees that the Rebbe is standing there. So he says to our Rebbe, I'm thinking to move to Eretz Yisrael. I think I should move to Israel. So the Rebbe said to Frierdiker Rebbe, how could you think that? We just started working. We got here 10 years ago. We began to do work on spreading Yiddishkeit. We're going to go to Israel now. So the Frierdiker Rebbe thought, and he said, Ashena Machshava. It's a good thought. It's a good thought. So the Rebbe, when he told the story, said, in his thought, the Rebbe was already in Eretz Yisrael. I need you to know that many of the Chabad Rebbeim, if not all, before they passed away, talked about Eretz Yisrael. Because the best place to pass away and be buried is in the Holy Land, Eretz Yisrael. But Lepoil, the Rebbe, is where the Chassidim are, with us in Russia, and now in Ukraine, and now in America. But in Machshava, in his thought, the Rebbe, in other words, the Frierdiker Rebbe was understanding that soon his physical life is going to end. So he thought about moving to Eretz Yisrael, but he didn't actually move to Eretz Yisrael because the work is here. And then on Yud Shvat of Tafshin Yud, 1950, that means 86 years ago today, the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. And the Rebbe became the Rebbe. There's details to that story which I'm not going to tell you, because we are focused on how the Rebbe revolutionized the world with Shlichus and Mitzrayim. This is the end of our first talk. Let's break for 5 minutes and we'll reconvene. Okay? Okay.
Question?
At your own risk.
So they said that starting 1 hour full plus.
What the three things are that Bechadaka told them we don't know. The first thing was Mesilas Shabbos. Oh, Shabbos afternoon gatherings for children. Is there a pitas in the room? A pitas? Or even just a tiny little?
We're gonna like set it up.
Okay, let's begin. The Frierdiker Rebbe passes away on Shabbos Yud Shvat. And as I already explained to you, our topic is not addressing the process by which the Rebbe became a Rebbe. We're not talking about that story. We're talking about the story of the new Lubavitch, the Lubavitch in America. So this is the lens through which we're going to go. 1 month after the Rebbe passed, the Rebbe passed by Yud Shvat. 1 month later was Yud Adar. The 10th day in the month of Adar was 30 days after the previous Rebbe passed away. And the Shloshim. So there was an event, there was a Fabrengen, there was a discussion. The Bachram were learning in yeshiva, the boys were learning in yeshiva. And there was an announcement made that after Ma'ariv, all the Bachram had to leave the room because the Rebbe called a meeting in the shul. We call that the shul upstairs. Then they call it downstairs because the Rebbe lived on the second floor. The Frierdiker Rebbe did. This was on the first floor. The shul, when you get married and they put you in the back and the Sheva Barachas, that big room, that was the big shul. It's a tiny little room, but it was considered a large hall. You understand? And the Rebbe called a meeting of Anashal about Chassidim, and he said the Bachram don't have to be there, so the Bachram shouldn't be there. So the Bachram climbed under the tables. They didn't leave. They wanted to hear the meeting. The Rebbe came into the meeting. He sat at the head of the table. I'm assuming everybody stood up and they showed him a lot of respect. And the Rebbe said to the collected, to the Chassidim who gathered there, the following. He said as ridiculous. We all know what happened 30 days ago. Because of what happened 30 days ago, many people come to me and have told me that I have new responsibilities. The Rebbe says, I have to do other things than I used to do before. But there's something you need to understand, the Rebbe told the assembled. that I am a chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I have a mission, a shlichus from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that is going to come first, period. So I want you to know, you want me to take on additional responsibilities, I'm not saying no. But I want you to know that those additional responsibilities can only happen if you help me with my work. If you help me do the mission that the previous Rebbe gave me. Because my mission I'm going to do. My shlichus, what the previous Rebbe left to me to do, I will do. If you want me to do other things, the Rebbe didn't explain, but everybody understood exactly what he was saying. To say chassidus, to have yechidus, to be a Rebbe, you're going to have to help me. Because you just understand, the Rebbe said, that my first achrayus is the mission I was given by the previous Rebbe, by the Rebbe the Shvat, and that will get done. Anything extra will depend on you. And the Baruch was sitting under the table, and they hear this. So when the Rebbe finished speaking, it became very exciting. There was a chassid named Rabbi Kazanowski. He got up. He was a very big chassid, very emotional man, and he started to scream. He said to the Rebbe, "We're going to support you just like we supported the Frierdiker Rebbe. We're going to stand with you just like we stood with the Frierdiker Rebbe. We're going to make sure that all your needs are met." Rabbi El Khan, who wrote down the story, writes, they didn't raise one penny that night, but they talked about it. And the Rebbe said, you don't have to get excited. You just have to understand. I'm telling you something very straight. Before anything, I'm going to do my job. My job is the job that Rebbe gave me, the previous Rebbe gave me. Everything else has to come second. So if you'll help me, there'll be more of my time, more of my energy. I'll do other things. But the shlichus that I was given by the Rebbe the Shver, by the Frierdiker Rebbe, is going to happen. That was the position the Rebbe took on that date, and that's the position the Rebbe held to this day. That his number one responsibility is what the shlichus that the previous Rebbe gave him, which is shlichus. That's right. The Rebbe, we all attribute it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gets all the credit. That's the real truth. The Rebbe did it. But he was given that mandate by the previous Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe made the decision to put Lubavitch in a new direction, and the Rebbe made sure that that direction is the course we stay on. This is who we are. 11 months later was the first Shvat, right? 1951, 1 year exactly. After the previous Rebbe passed away, there was a Fabrengen. I'm sure you've been told about that Fabrengen. There's a lot of stories about that evening, and there's a lot of drama. It was a very dramatic evening. If you haven't heard stories, you can go to my website, go to my Shvat page. I have the story of Shvat. You can listen to the story. I probably told it here many years ago. And you can hear the stories that happened from the time the previous Rebbe passed away till the time that Rebbe became a Rebbe. And of course, the highlight of that Fabrengen, that first Fabrengen, was that the Rebbe said a Maimer Chassidus. Until then, the Rebbe never said a Maimer Chassidus. He wouldn't even review a Maimer Chassidus. He would speak sichas, but he wouldn't say a Maimer Chassidus. That night, the Rebbe said a Maimer Chassidus, and we all know about that Maimer Chassidus because it's very, very famous. Because that Maimer Chassidus, the Frierdiker Rebbe made a statement, an announcement. The announcement was, we are the seventh generation. We are Deira Shvi, we're the seventh generation. And the seventh generation has the task of bringing the Shekhinah back down into this world, which, if you would translate it today in 2026, 76 years after the Rebbe spoke the words, it means Poshet Kibshute, to bring Mashiach. This was the mission that the Rebbe announced in that initial Fabrengen, that we're the seventh generation and we're going to bring the Shekhinah back into this world. Now you must understand, you know how many people were that Fabrengen? Maybe 100, 150. 770 was packed. That room is not bigger than this room. This room is bigger than that room. Packed. Well, there's not a lot of people. And most of those people were old and had white beards and spoke Yiddish, and they were not going to do Dick Tracy. You understand? The Rebbe spoke to them and said, we are the seventh generation, and the seventh generation is rolled to bring the Shekhinah back into this world, and we're going to do it. It wasn't even a fantasy. It wasn't even a dream. It was completely ridiculous. And in the very first Maimed, that makes an announcement. We're the seventh generation. The seventh generation has a task and a mission to bring the Shekhinah back into this world. The Rebbe said, when you're born to the seventh generation, you don't even choose it. It's because 6 came before you, and you're the seventh, boom. You have the Maila of Kol Hashrin Chvivim, the seventh above, but you have to do the mission of the seventh generation, and the mission of the seventh generation is to bring the Shekhinah into this world. And people laughed at the Rebbe. A lot of people laughed at the Rebbe. Now, the Rebbe said that first Maimed. In that first Maimed, the Rebbe did not beat around the bush. He said exactly what his mission statement was. And it wasn't for decades, for many, many years, that the Rebbe wouldn't speak about that expression, the seventh generation, which we talk about all the time. In the later years of the Rebbe's leadership, he would go back to that expression. The very first Maimed, the Rebbe said, Deira Shvi, and then he stopped saying it. He started doing it, you understand. He wasn't busy talking, he was busy acting. In the last years of the Rebbe's Nesias, the more recent years, the Rebbe started to say that expression, Deira Shvi. But he announced it in the very first Maimed, that we're the seventh generation, and that the mission of the seventh generation is to bring the Shekhinah into this world. I want to share with you two thoughts, two statements that the Rebbe made in that Maimed. And one of them was that you have to learn from Avraham Avinu. That Avraham Avinu was the first Jew. And Moshe Rabbeinu is the seventh from Avraham Avinu. So if you want to understand Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to understand Avraham Avinu. Because only if you understand Avraham Avinu, you understand the seventh of Avraham Avinu. And what did Avraham Avinu do? So it says in the Chumash, Avraham Avinu preached the oneness of God to a world that was pagan. All the people believed in many gods, and Avraham Avinu talked about one God. Avraham Avinu was a great arguer. He was a great debater. He loved to argue with people. He was the first Jew. He debated anybody who wanted about theology. And he argued, and he established, and he proved, and he asserted that there's one God. Ein Mubad. And like we know from the Midrashim, he made people thank Hashem for the food they were eating and not to thank him. And if they wanted to thank him for the food, he said, pay for it. Right? If you thank Hashem, it's free. If you're thanking me, you got to pay. And he began to teach the world about the Eibush. So the Pasuk says, Vayikra Sham B'Shem Hashem Keilelim, Avraham Avinu called out the name of Hashem to the world. So on this it says in Rashi, from the Midrash, Al Tikra Vayikra Ela Vayakri, which means Avraham Avinu didn't call, he had others to call. Or as the Rebbe said in the first Maimed, Avraham Avinu didn't scream, he got others to scream. It wasn't enough that he screamed. Ein Eid Mulvadeh, there's only one God, and he's the master of heaven and earth. But he wanted that the whole world should scream with him. Al Tikra Vayikra Ela Vayakri. He got others to scream. So the Rebbe said that this rule, which is called Al Tikra means don't read it like it's written, read it different, has a rule attached to it. That whenever the Gemara says, the Chazal say, like we say in davening, right before later, right? Al Tikra Haliches Ela Haloches, right? Al Tikra Bonoich Ela Boinoich. You know what I'm talking about? Right before later, we have two Al Tikri. This is from the Chazal, from the Braises, from the Mishnahs. Whenever we find the expression Al Tikra, you don't change the reading, you read it twice. You read it the new way and you read it the old way. So the Rebbe said that you have to read it like the Al Tikra says. Not he called, they had others to call. But you also have to read it the way it's written, that Avraham Avinu also called. And the Rebbe said in Yiddish, Oy du willst, as dir soll angehen der Vayikra, muss sein der Vayakri. Which means, if you wish that you personally should have a relationship with Hashem, you must bring somebody else to have that relationship. This is in the first Maimed, girls, the first Maimed. Oy du willst, if you desire, as a sein der Vayikra, you want to scream to Hashem and feel connected to Hashem, muss sein der Vayakri. In this generation, our relationship with Hashem begins in bringing somebody else to the Eibishter. This is direct quotes from that first Maimed. But there's another quote, a little later in the Maimed. The Rebbe says, you're going to come to a place where they don't know Atena mitzvahs. They don't know about the Eibishter. They don't even know about Aleph Beis. And you're going to come to that place. The Rebbe gets emotional. You're going to put yourself aside. And you're going to make yourself busy to find a person. who doesn't even know Aleph Beis, and you're going to teach him that he should call the Eibush. This is the first Maimon, girls, the first Maimon. The Rebbe is describing Shlichus. It would take many years for this to materialize. But that's what Shlichus was. The Rebbe, the very first Maimon says, I'm going to send you to places where the Jews you're going to know don't even know Aleph and Beis and Gimel and Dalet, and they don't know the Torah and the Aleph Beis. And you're going to have to put them first and yourself second. Not physically, spiritually. You're going to have to come to those places and meet those Jews and teach them Kometz Aleph. You could be learning Torah, you could be doing mitzvahs, you could be at a high level, and you're going to put yourself aside and you're going to do the work that needs to be done. This was the Rebbe's first at bat. You understand? When you join the big leagues, you're called a rookie, right? And there's the first at bat of the big leaguers. I don't know if you people follow baseball, but that's the only metaphor I know. The first at bat, the rookie gets a hit. It's like, oh, his first at bat, he got a hit. Most of them make out. B'chlal in baseball, most of the time you make out. This was the first at bat. What did the Rebbe say? The Rebbe said, we're the seventh generation. We're going to bring the Shekhinah into this world. And that we have to understand that our Hasidus, depends on being Makar of another Jew. What does it require? You go to a place where you doesn't know Aleph Beis, and you put yourself aside and you're Makar of that person. All of these forms, Kindalach, are in the very first mind, the very first mind. In other words, the Rebbe didn't lie. He told us from the beginning what he was planning on doing. And you should know, as we sit here 76 years later, he's not done, man. He's not finished. The Rebbe is not finished. There's more work to do. There's more Jews to meet. There's more shluchim to go on shlichus. There's more of us to become the Rebbe's chassidim in this milchama, this war. So I want to continue, okay? In 1956, 7 years later, 6.5 years later, on Sukkot, the Rebbe made a fabrengen. That fabrengen was a Chalamoid night, so there's an actual recording, it's a tape. You could actually hear the Rebbe speaking. And the Sikha, the Gem finally put it out. They came from many years ago. Very good idea for Sikha. You got to do Simchas Beis Hashem Tashni Zayin. They didn't like it, but then they did it. The Rebbe begins the Sikha with a proposal on tactics of war. That's how the Rebbe starts to see it. Tachsisei Milchama. You know, there have been books written on tactics of war. There's one thing that's good about war. And you know what that is? Nothing. War is the worst thing man ever invented. But wars are simple. They're not complicated. They're not nuanced. They're kill or be killed. It's very simple. There are not that many ways to fight war. There is more than one way. And one of the great distinctions that exists in the history of warfare is what's called defensive warfare and offensive warfare. Defensive warfare would be called in the modern world trench warfare. Right? Who started trench warfare? In America, the Civil War was the trench war. We lost 750,000 Americans. And the whole America was 20 million people. We have no idea what that means. We have no idea what that means. But it created America. The Civil War created America. Until then, it was states. After that, it was a country. And they're still angry at us after. They're still greatest. And it ended in World War I. World War I was the tragedy of the trenches with the gas and so on. That's called defensive war. You dig a ditch. You stand behind the parapet and you wait for the guy to attack and you shoot him, bang, bang. Then there's offensive war, when you become the aggressor, right? What is the spearhead of offensive war? I mean, I don't know if it's true today anymore because the world has changed, but the spear of offensive war is the tank. It's a monster made of steel that the soldiers can hide behind, right? And they can attack. And the reason we, the West, won the First World War is because we invented the tank. You know that? The First World War was never finished, it was a war of attrition, killing and being killed. The tank, the British created the tank, the French created the tank. But who perfected the tank? The Nazis did. And they called it Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is the opposite of defensive war, the opposite of sitting in one place and waiting to be attacked. You attack. Now, what happens when you attack? Huh? What happens when you attack? You create a column, a line. So first of all, you have to supply that line, the food, and the greatest supply is fuel. You run out of gas, you finish. But the hardest thing about a spearhead is the flanks. When you run in a straight line, you can be attacked on the side. So it's not simple. Blitzkrieg, I mean, the German trick was they were evil people, but they were not stupid people. How you do that kind of an attack, you have to protect your flanks. So the Rebbe talked about war. He didn't speak about the Nazis. He didn't speak about the Civil War. He spoke about defensive war and offensive. He said it in Hebrew, Milchemes Hagana and Milchemes Tnufa, defensive war and offensive. And the Rebbe said that each tactic has its own strengths and weaknesses. Each of these two tactics have milas and chesronos, strength and weakness. But offensive war has certain strengths that defensive war doesn't. Because when you fight a defensive war, you sit in one place, you dig a ditch, you dig a canal, you hide under the ground, you try to protect yourself, but you're stuck in one place. Offensive war has a few tactics. Number one, you're mobile, you're moving. So you get to decide when you're going to fight and where you're going to fight. So you get to choose the terrain. You get to choose the higher ground. You get to pick where you're going to fight from because you're on the attack. Number two, you choose the time of the attack, when to attack and where to attack, the time and place of the attack. And number three, said that Rebbe, when you go in offensive war, there's something called collateral damage. You know what collateral damage means? The people who get killed by mistake, the women, the children. When you go on offensive war, the collateral damage happens by the enemy. If you have a defensive war, the collateral damage happens by you. And the Rebbe spent about 10 minutes describing these two tactics of war, offensive war and defense. And then the Rebbe continued. And remember, this sikha is not only printed, you can actually hear the Rebbe's voice. There's an audio tape, you can hear the Rebbe's voice. And the Rebbe says, for centuries, for many generations, from Jews, Haredi Jews, Orthodox Jews, especially what they call the extra, the ultra, the 3 times ultra Jews, Hasidim, whatever, very from Jews, have always preferred defensive war. We build a city, we put a wall around it. We cloister ourselves, we protect ourselves from the whole world. We live inside those worlds, and we don't care what anybody thinks, and what anybody does, we live in our own world. But the world changes, it is. Constantly changing. And then from time to time, those walls are breached. There's an attack against the enclave, against the cloister, that's the right word. The fortification of Haredi Jews, and people are trying to break through those walls and bring in not good values, not good thoughts, not good ideas, not good aspects of life. So you make an emergency meeting to them. And you sit and you say, how are we going to defend ourselves against this attack? And we fight back. And the Rebbe says this has been going on for centuries. And every time we're attacked, we lose more. Every time we're attacked, we lose more. And we refuse to learn from our mistakes. The Rebbe actually used the expression in Hebrew, due to our many sins, we keep losing. We have this attitude that from Jews stay away from the world. They hide and they protect themselves and they isolate themselves and they quarantine themselves and they cloister themselves and protect themselves, and we keep losing, we keep losing, we keep losing. And the Rebbe said it's time to go on offense. Very straight. This is not me, my imagination. This is. If we want to stay from, we have to stop hiding from the world. We need to attack. And he explained, in war, there's going to be karbonis. In war, people are going to fall. It's just the way it is. In the war of good against evil, the war of God against the Yetzer Hara on earth, it's a war. There are karbonis. There's people falls. But from Yidden keep playing defense and they keep losing more and more and more. Let them go on offense and you'll see you'll lose less. Not you won't lose, but you'll lose less. And more importantly, the collateral damage, the people who fall by mistake, is going to be over there, not over here. And the Rebbe announced and explained the sheet of Lubavitch from Jews who go out into the world and challenge the world. We don't hide in our own world and do our own thing. We come to the Jew who's not from, and we push him to do a mitzvah. You come to a goy, lahavu, and you say to him, you have to believe in God. You have to keep the Shabbat mitzvahs. You have to live a life that the Eibishter meant for human beings to live. Family life, children, traditional values. The Rebbe said, go on often. Now, girls, I don't think people understand this revolution even as you and I are sitting here. That sikha was said 69 years ago, almost 70 years ago. And people don't understand how seriously the Rebbe means it. The Rebbe is saying a fact. You want to stay from? Attack. You want children to stay from? Attack. Don't hide. But the hiding seems to work quite well, no? It seems that way. And the attack seems to have its risks. No, it looks that way. No. The Rebbe says, do the math. Add it up. Look what's been happening in the last 200 years, and look what's been happening in the last 70 years. You will see that when from Jews go on the attack, of course there's losses. But the losses are fewer and the gains are so much more. This, girls, is how the Rebbe described the new Lubavitch. We're attacking the world. We're bringing the world God. We're bringing the world Torah mitzvahs. For Yidden, the 630 mitzvahs. For Goyim, the 7 mitzvahs. And the 7 mitzvahs of Goyim is much more than 7. 7 is just an official number. There's 4. Goyim have many mitzvahs. Many mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says, don't protect yourself. You want to protect yourself? Attack. Don't hide, because you'll lose. You'll lose. And in the long run, you'll lose more and more and more. There is a halt in an ain farliden. We continue losing. Go on off. And the thing that you have to understand about this is that Rebbe means it. This is not a nice speech. This is a man of great genius, big, not just a big tzaddik, a holy Jew, who's saying, we want from kids. Let's teach our from kids to go out into the street and make the non-from kid from, not hide him away and protect him. And, just he should know about the world. He should live in a holy enclave, in a holy environment. The Rebbe said this has been going on for hundreds of years. And the Rebbe said in Yiddish, "Mir halten and ein farlid," and we continue to lose. Stop it. For the from world outside of Lubavitch, do you know how disturbing this idea is? Do you know how crazy this is? How novel this is? How new this is? This is Lubavitch. This is who we are, if you stick around. I mean, I had girls learn the Mechon Chana who literally became Satan Chassidim. And they told me why. They didn't want this. They wanted that safe, protective world. They want what they wanted. But if you're going to raise your kids here, this is who we are. This is who we are. This is what the Rebbe teaches. And it's absolutely a revolution. 2 men who are in the 70s, separately, screamed at me. One of them actually called me an apokritos for saying that the Rebbe changed Lubavitch. The Rebbe changed Lubavitch. He absolutely changed Lubavitch. If you would ask the Rebbe, he would say, not me, my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And it's true, the Frierdiker Rebbe did, but the Frierdiker Rebbe was the brain, was the father of these ideas. The Rebbe did them. And there's a new approach. From Yidden stay from by telling the non-from Jew, by telling the Goy that there's a God, then you have to do what he wants, you have to listen to him on some level or another level. This, girls, is it's a key component of understanding what Lubavitch is, what the Rebbe did, right? What's my title? How the Rebbe revolutionized the world with Shlichus and Mivtzoyim. This Sikha is a key piece in this puzzle, a very, very key piece in this puzzle. And then, of course, there's many other key pieces in this puzzle. The whole idea of the mitzvah tank, how you go out into the street and you make noise, right? It's a chilul Hashem. It's not nice. Why are you making noise in Manhattan? What's the answer? Every Meshuggah is making noise in Manhattan. If you're not making noise in Manhattan, you're a Meshuggah. You're supposed to make noise in Manhattan. So make Jewish noise. Make Torah noise. Make mitzvah noise. You're embarrassed? That's a problem. But the problem is not you're embarrassed because of Manhattan. The problem is you're embarrassed because you're embarrassed of yourself. Go make noise. Go, the whole world is a noisy place. There should be a Yiddish noise. There should be a noise of Torah mitzvahs. That's how the Rebbe sees it. So the Rebbe understands it. And that's why the Rebbe advocates it. People don't understand. Lubavitchers are nuts. No one's going to debate that. But it really is his fault. We're not perfect. And I'm not justifying the chesrenis that we have. Whether the chesrenis in politics, or chesrenis in Yiddish Shomayim, or chesrenis in other things. But Lubavitch is the Rebbe's creation. We try to do what he wants. He wants us absolutely to make a parade and march, fill the entire Brooklyn Bridge with cars of Hanukkah, and then stop the traffic. The whole world should see it's Hanukkah. Techil Hashem. What's Techil Hashem? The whack jobs make a parade. They put on pink clothing or green clothing or brown clothing or blue clothing, or they put on flowers. We're going to also make the same noise. I'm going to kayam a nade on the roof of our car. I'm going to say it's Chanukah, it's freezing, it's cold, it's at night, and it's dark, and it's outside, and there's lights. And one of the components that's key to this whole philosophy, this whole idea of going on offense, is the mitzvah. The Rebbe's brainchild, one of the Rebbe's great chaps. You meet a Jew, don't give him a speech. Don't learn with him. You should learn with a Jew anyway, but that's not the key first thing. You meet a Jew, you do a mitzvah. You meet a Jew, you put film on him. You give her a candle she should light before 4:45. You'll light the candle. After 4:45, don't light it. Light it on time. A mitzvah. You meet a Jew, don't give him speeches. Just do a mitzvah. Mivtzoy. Also a very weird concept. Why? Because it's hit and run. It's hit and run. You meet a Jew, you do it. You're never going to see him again. He's never going to say, so what did you gain? So the Rebbe says you gained another thing. First of all, it's obviously Yisrael. Second of all, you planted a seed. And that seed is going to seep down into the neshama of this yid, and tomorrow it's going to grow. You meet a Jew, you do a mitzvah. So there's a story with the Rebbe himself. Now, if I had more time, I'll tell you the story with a lot of drama. I don't have any more time. I have to rush now. I have 10 minutes left. So I'll tell you the story B'kitzur. There was a Hungarian Jew, Musat Mechasid, who lived in Hungary before the war. He was married to a few children. And one day, a Mishigas went into his head. He decided he wants to start his life over. He ran away from Hungary. He abandoned his wife and kids, didn't even give her a divorce. And he moved to Paris. He started a new life. He's going to be a Parisian. He's going to be one of those stuff. Those artists who stay up at night and look at the lights. The day he arrives in Paris, someone knocks the door. He opens the door. There's a man with a hat like Dick Tracy. You understand? A hat like this, with a little black beard. And he says to him, "Did you put on film today?" That was what he asked. He has no idea how he would know he was in Paris. He says, "No, I'm done with film. I've been doing it this bar mitzvah finished." No, you just to put on film. He says, "I did it for years. I'm finished." Said, "Well, you have to put on film." They got into an argument, and the guy says, "This is my apartment. Get out of my house." He says, "I'm going to leave. I promise you, I'll leave right away. But you film on the first." They argued for a long time, and the other guy was more stubborn. Then he said, "Okay, I'll put on the film. You're going to leave right away and get out of your apartment." Anyway, the next day came again. Every day. Never asked him what he did. Never asked him where his wife was. Never asked him what his children. Never told him he's a mamza in a Russian, the worst man. You'll live and your wife and your kids and you run off. He just put film on and left. Day after day for weeks. And one day this man opened up and told him the truth. And the tefillin leger got him some money and put him on a ship and sent him back to his family. That man was the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe was doing with Tzoyim in the 1930s in Paris. In other words, he was doing an experiment. The Rebbe tried, before he told us to do film, he did film. He wanted to see the impact of a mitzvah on a yid. You meet a strange Jew and you don't give him a speech. Don't tell me he's a bum. I mean, in America, you tell a person he's bad, they stop listening. Hey, don't talk. I'm not listening. You want someone to listen to you in America, you have to say something nice only. But the Rebbe came up with this tactic of meeting angels doing a mitzvah. It doesn't seem logical. Why? You put film on the yid, 5 years later, he's going to come from. He's going to be a misnagid, learning an Esha Torah. He's not going to like Lubavitch. The Rebbe doesn't mind at all. Don't bother him one bit. Doesn't like people, don't like him, but he likes to give and keep mitzvah. So you go out on the street, you find a Jew, and you put film, a mitzvah, a mitzvah. This, girls, is a key component of the Rebbe's approach. And the philosophy behind it is a story. I don't have time to tell you the story, but I'm just going to tell you the punchline of the story. The Frierdiker Rebbe said once about something. A Yid is Getlichkeit. A Jew is godliness. A Chetz Shel Mitzvah, a holy artifact, a tefillin, a mezuzah, a pushka even, is godliness. Getlichkeit zu Getlichkeit zither. There's a natural magnetism between godliness and godliness. You bring a Jew next to tefillin and the Jew pull at each other. They pull at each other. And he brings out the neshama. A Yid is Getlichkeit. A Jew is godliness. A Chefze shel mitzvah is Getlichkeit. A holy artifact is godliness. Getlichkeit to Getlichkeit tzitzer. Godliness and godliness draw each other out. So you meet a Yid, he's under piles of schmutz, piles. There's so much garbage in that person's mind, in his heart, and in his body, and in his life. You're going to start digging, you'll never finish. So you shine a light that triggers the light underneath all that schmutz, and they pull on each other, and they pull on each other, and they pull on each other, and they pull on each other until it pulls through all the schmutz. And you saved all that digging. You didn't waste your time with the schmutz, you shined the light. This is a brainchild of the Rebbe, Mivtzoyim. There are thousands of Jews today who are completely frum because some Chabadnik put film on them. Some of them don't want to admit it even. But if you hit with them, yeah, you know, the truth is, one time in college, but I'm not Chabad. God forbid, I wouldn't want to be accused of being crazy. Okay, but this is the story of Lubavitch. And then, of course, Shlichus, the Rebbe sends his people where the Jews are. I wish I had more time because I have so much more to say. The Rebbe sends Lubavitch where the people are. Today, I have a brother who's on Shlichus in a place where there are not enough Yidden to him to be able to support his family. There's not enough Jews where he lives to make a parnasa to support himself. So you guys have a different job. He makes a living doing something else, but he lives in that place. And every free minute he's being makabin to maybe he's doing shlichus. Today, guys and girls are going in shlichus, young men, boys and women, boys and girls are going shlichus to places where there are so few Jews, they have to figure out the finances. The place cannot support them. But they're Lubavitch. And they want to be in shlichus. And they're going to raise their children in that place, which is so exceedingly hard. It's so hard. The hardest part of shlichus is the family. It's so hard. It's nefesh is unbelievable. And there are hundreds of boys and girls who are desperate. Give me a hole in the wall, any place on planet Earth. There's Jews, I want to go there. How am I going to make a run for it? Hashem is going to have to help because it don't make no sense. And they go and it works. Because the Rebbe goes with every couple. You know, there's a lady, Mrs. Lipsker from Florida. Her husband just passed away. Rabbi Lipsker passed away last year. So one of her stories was that when they went on shlichus, she was 19. Crown Heights girl, very protected. She grew up in the hub of Crown Heights. Her family is very, very, what they call Gej, old Chabad stock, very traditional. And she was around her parents, around her mother, her sisters. She was very in the bubble. And she married her husband. Her husband had great ambition. Her husband was a big Talmid Chacham, a very good boy, to go on shlichus. And they dated, they courted, they met as a couple does, and they talked about shlichus. She wanted to do it in principle, but the idea freaked her out. She really didn't want to do it because she liked Crown Heights. That was her world. So she kept on telling her husband. She kept telling her mother, "I don't know how's it going to happen." So they had a meeting with the Rebbe, how do you heed this? And her mother said to her, Chana, tell the Rebbe everything that's in your heart. Tell the Rebbe exactly how you feel. Her husband said to her, Chani, don't say a word to the Rebbe. The Rebbe knows best. You stand there like a soldier. Whatever he tells you to do, you do. Don't say a word. So they went into the Rebbe, and she couldn't decide who she's going to listen to, her mother or her husband. And she kept quiet. And the Rebbe talked about moving to Florida. It's probably 1971, 72. I just had a girl in my house yesterday, this Shabbos, who how do I turn this off? Who learned by Hani Lipsker in Florida in those days, 50, 60 years ago. I was away for Shabbos. It's Shabbos. I was in New Jersey. I don't know the name of the city. And I met a girl. She's a grandmother who knows Hani Lipsker from 1972. She still remembers her. So she's standing in Yechidus, and the Rebbe is talking about Shlichus. She's 19. And she blurts out. She just can't control it. It pops out of her mouth. What if I can't do it? What if I can't do it? I don't know if she spoke in Yiddish or in English, but she didn't plan to say those words. The word just came. She was so afraid. What if I can't do it? And the Rebbe looks at her with a big smile and says, of course you can do it. I'm going to go with you. Straight out, I'm going to go with you. You'll do it. I'm going to be with you. And then the Rebbe says, but you might as well do it b'simcha. Might as well be happy about the mission. Because you're not going to be happy. You're going to make collaboration very unpleasant. I'm going to go with you, but I don't like sad people. You got to do it b'simcha, the Rebbe tells. Rebbe goes with every shliach. I mean, one of the greatest miracles. Shliach, guys go away to places, boys and girls, not the biggest tzaddikim. There's not a single from person for hundreds of miles. You know what it means? A girl who's 21, 22 years old has to travel by plane every month for a mikveh. And if God forbid, chas v'sholem, she shouldn't use the mikveh, who's going to know? Her mother. Her mother-in-law? No one's going to know. Maybe her husband. And they get on that plane and they travel to another country and they use the mikveh to be in the Rebbe shlichus. Where does that strength come from? Where does a young man and a young woman, American-born, who are not necessarily in Madrega's Beinani, they're a couple of steps below Beinani, get that courage? And just because the Rebbe goes with them on shlichus, and the Rebbe sees to it that the shlichus is carried out and that they're preserved where the Rebbe wants. Can I have 10 more minutes? May I have 10 more minutes? 10 more minutes. I want to tell you a story. I have a friend. I grew up with him. He lived on Utica Avenue. We lived between Schenectady and Troy. We lived at the end of Crown Heights, and he lived off the cliff of Crown Heights, His name is Penny Andrews. Rabbi, he's a shliach in Florida someplace. Penny Andrews' most important priorities in life were the New York Jets and the New York Mets. You understand? He was a rabid sports fan, as was his father and his old. I remember he would come to the house on Sunday that all the football games playing at the same time. He's a nice guy, but nobody would say that Penny Andrews was a Chassidish Shabbat. He was a nice. He was in yeshiva. He's a ball of fun, really. But he didn't daven and learn. He's Penny. He was a bacher in Florida. And the Miami Dolphins had a home team, football, had a home game, Hanukkah. So Penny Andrews, who was then probably 22 years old, comes to the shluchim. He's younger than I am. He's my brother's age. To the biggest shluchim in South Florida, says, we have to make a Hanukkah Neder lighting by the football. Mm-hmm. And they tell him, are you nuts? What's the cliche? It's going to be a Chol Hashem. The Rebbe is going to be so turned off. He says, no, the Rebbe is going to like it. And these were senior shluchim. They were then in their 50s. Probably 50s. So we got to do it and tell them no way. And they argued. And of course, Penny wanted free tickets to the game. So he said, you know what? We'll do it. We'll ride to the Rebbe, but you're going to go with us to New York and you're going to make the announcement of the public. So they ride to the Rebbe. They got the Rebbe's approval. So Rabbi Penny Andrews, he was a bacher, still single, with two other very famous important shluchim, fly to New York. And every Shabbos, by the Fabrengen, at a certain point, the Rebbe would give out mashke to anybody who's making a public event. So they get up in front of the Rebbe. I don't remember this, but my brother says to me, as soon as the Rebbe Penny started to speak, the Rebbe had a smile from here to here. The shluchim, who were then in their 40s probably, were pashat embarrassed. He's holding the bottle, and he's saying, we're going to make a Hanukkah Meneda in the Joe Rabbi Stadium in South Florida. This is the Miami Dolphins. Kickoff, he announces what time kickoff is, and what time is going to be halftime, and when they're going to light the Meneda. And the Rebbe got such a kick out of it. Everybody was afraid that Rebbe would be turned off, and the Rebbe thought it was cool. Penny Andrews got married. Now, his father is a very successful man, big businessman. He's lost and won fortunes, I remember. I know this, we grew up with these people. Penny's his oldest son. So as soon as his son got married, he put him in business. Did him a business, started a business for him. Had Penny been a businessman, he would be very wealthy. He's very capable. And he writes to the Rebbe, I'm starting a business. Now, there's a lot of versions to the story. I have to ask him personally. I have to meet him and ask him. But the way I know the story was, he wrote to the Rebbe about starting a business that he had already started. He bought a business. He started a business. I think he bought a house. And he gets an answer from the Rebbe, what about shlichus? No one would think of Penny as a shliach. I think he's the last person that ever personally sent a shlichus. And you know why they never sent them a shlichus? Because of the Miami Dolphins. What everybody else is afraid of, that's exactly what he wants. There's millions of goyim gathered, like the Meneda there. It's a Kiddush Hashem. The Rebbe asked him, what about shlichus? Penny Andrews gave his business to his brother, gave it to him. His brother's a very rich man. And he moved to South Florida. And he became a shliach. I want you to know, Jews who are much more Hasidish than him who came to the Rebbe with plans and the Rebbe changed them, were not so quick to listen. Penny did exactly what he was told. Why? The Rebbe said he got to listen. He's a simple person. And the Rebbe wanted him on Shlichus because he's crazy. Because that's exactly what a Shliach is supposed to be. You have to go to places where no one wants to go and make noise. Make noise. This is, what's the quote of my title? The revolutionize the world with Shlichus and Mitzrayim. This is it. We think that we hesitate. The Kavanah has to be the Shem Shemayim. You can't go to the game to watch the game. You have to go to the game to put on film. It's a regular practice. They go to big games in all sports, and they tailgate, they make kosher barbecues, they offer free food to put on film, and they go into the game, they light lemonade. This is the Rebbe's idea, the Rebbe's vision. Now, I have a story to tell you and a punchline. Okay, I hope I'm not going to take too much of your time. Okay, I'll just tell you the punchline. The story is very important, but I don't have any more time. I feel bad that I'm cheating you from your lunch, or I'm cheating your lunch from you. Every year we learn Basi Lagani. Every year we learn Basi Lagani. But every year we learn a different chapter of Basi Lagani. This year, in 2026, Tafshin Peivav, we're learning chapter 16, Peidik Tezayim, which means we're learning the Maimorah that the Rebbe said in 1966, 16 years after the previous Rebbe passed, and in 1986, which is 36 years after the previous Rebbe said the same Peidik. Each Maimorah is very different. The Maimorah are actually opposite. So the Rebbe said, Basi Lagani, oftentimes, not everything he wanted to say, he said on Yud Shvat, he would continue into the next Maimon. So in 1966, there was a Maimon Basi Lagani. The Shabbos after was B'Shalach, like this year. And the Rebbe said another Maimon, connected to Basi Lagani, V'yelech Havayis Hayom. And in that Maimon, the Rebbe makes a point. And the point is as follows. The Basi Lagani says that there is a situation, the concept called Tzivos Hashem, the army of Hashem. And that Tzivos Hashem, the army of Hashem, fight a war, to win a war. And they fight to the point of self-sacrifice. They put them between a soldier and a slave. They both have complete subservience. But a soldier is ready to give his life, a slave isn't. And the Rebbe says this army has a war to fight. And there's different kinds of wars. But there's a war that's called the Milchemes Nitzachin, a war that you must win, you cannot lose. It's existential. You can't lose this war. When you fight a war that you cannot lose, the rules of government break down. The king stops trusting his generals, and he personally gets involved in the tactics of war. He gets involved in every day of the war. He takes treasure, hidden treasure, which has not been shown and not been used for generations, and he sells it at a discount to make the money to pay and win this war. And the last thing is the king even gives away his own life. He sacrifices his own life. This war must be won. And if you study the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, they did exactly that. The Rebbe got personally involved in Shlichus. The Rebbe spent his time looking over every activity of not the big shluchim, the teeny tiny little ones. And every activity, the Rebbe paid attention to every detail, because in the times of war, the king personally oversees every little battle. And he gives out the treasure. And the treasure has a power, a deep power, very deep power. And the power that this treasure has helps the soldiers win the war. Say in the Maimed of V'yelech Havayis Hayom, the Maimed of Shabbos B'Shalom, which the Rebbe said 60 years ago, this Shabbos, in 1966, the Rebbe makes a very powerful point. He says one thing that's absolutely true about war, is you have to have, and I quote, Hachlata gemura le'ezeh tzad. That means you have to make a resolution, a resolve to one side, and never question it. People have choices. Should I go here? Should I go here? Should I do this? You can make all the thinking you want. When you make a decision, it's absolute. You're never going back on it. And when a king fights a war, this is compounded. This is many times so strong. When you, as a king, look at your nation and you have to lead the people in a certain direction, if you decide to go to war, you don't go to war halfway. Hachlata gemura, an absolute decision. And the absolute decision means a very strong identity. This is the good side, this is the bad side, this is the winning side, this is my friend, this is my enemy. You have to fight, and you don't hesitate, and you go with all the strength. So the Rebbe has a very deep mystical explanation about this treasure. I didn't say for my life, I'm not going to explain to you. Predicated on this foundation. That when a king fights a war, the first thing he does is he makes a decision. And once he makes a decision, you're not going to budge him. The Rebbe made a decision a long time ago, which is our lives. If you're going to be Lubavitch, I'm not going to force it. It's a free country. There'll be one. If you choose to live here, this is that you are a member of this army. You're part of this battle. The Rebbe took a position that Lubavitch goes in a certain direction. And there's no equivocation. You're never not sure. Okay, and this is how the Rebbe revolutionized the world with Shlichus and Miftzayim. And now go eat lunch.
Here. You get everything set up nicely for the end of this spot.